Omar Bradley was an American military leader whose quiet competence and soldier-centered leadership made him one of the most respected generals of World War II. Born in Clark, Missouri on February 12, 1893, Bradley came from modest circumstances that would shape his character and his approach to command. He was a man of humble origins who rose to command millions of men in combat, yet never lost touch with the common soldier. His life was marked by steady achievement, personal integrity, and a leadership style that prioritized the welfare of his troops above personal glory. Bradley's early years were defined by rural poverty and family hardship. His father, John Smith Bradley, was a schoolteacher who struggled to support his family on a meager salary. His mother, Sarah Elizabeth Hubbard Bradley, was a strong woman who instilled in her son the values of hard work, education, and moral rectitude. The family lived in a small house in Clark, a tiny farming community in north-central Missouri. Money was always scarce, and young Omar learned early that success would require dedication and perseverance. When Omar was 14 years old, his father died of pneumonia, leaving the family in dire financial straits. His mother was left to raise Omar and his younger brother alone. She took in sewing and washing to make ends meet, working long hours to keep the family afloat. Omar watched his mother's struggle and vowed to make something of himself. The loss of his father and the subsequent poverty left a permanent mark on Bradley. He developed a quiet determination and a sense of responsibility that would characterize his entire life. Despite the family's poverty, Bradley's mother was determined that her sons would receive an education. She believed education was the path out of poverty, and she pushed Omar to excel in school. Bradley was a good student, though not brilliant. He was methodical, thorough, and willing to work harder than his classmates. He played baseball and showed natural athletic ability, but it was his steady reliability rather than flash or brilliance that defined him even as a young man. After graduating from high school in nearby Moberly, Missouri, Bradley faced the question of his future. His family had no money for college, and he needed to find a way to continue his education while supporting himself. A local congressman suggested he apply to the United States Military Academy at West Point. Bradley had never seriously considered a military career, but West Point offered a free education and the opportunity to better himself. He took the competitive examination and scored high enough to receive an appointment. In June 1911, Bradley arrived at West Point as a member of the class of 1915. He was 18 years old, tall and lanky, with a quiet demeanor that set him apart from more boisterous cadets. West Point was a shock to the boy from rural Missouri. The discipline was harsh, the academic work demanding, and the social environment competitive. But Bradley adapted through the same steady determination that had gotten him there. He was not the top student in his class, nor was he the most naturally gifted. But he worked hard, followed the rules, and earned the respect of his classmates and instructors. Bradley's West Point years were marked by solid, if unspectacular, performance. He graduated 44th in a class of 164 cadets. He played baseball for the academy team, showing more enthusiasm than exceptional skill. His classmates included Dwight Eisenhower, who would become his close friend and eventually his superior officer in World War II. The class of 1915 would become known as the class the stars fell on because so many of its members achieved general officer rank. Bradley formed friendships at West Point that would last his entire life and shape his military career. Upon graduation in 1915, Bradley was commissioned as a second lieutenant of infantry. He was assigned to the 14th Infantry Regiment, stationed along the Mexican border. The assignment was unglamorous, involving patrol duty and garrison work in the dusty outposts of the American Southwest. Bradley performed his duties competently but found peacetime military service somewhat tedious. He was a professional officer doing a job, not a glory seeker looking for adventure. In 1916, Bradley married Mary Elizabeth Keel, a woman he had met while stationed in the Northwest. The marriage was happy and enduring, lasting until her death in 1965. Mary was a stabilizing influence, supporting Bradley through the long years of peacetime service when promotion was slow and assignments were often boring. They had one daughter, Elizabeth, and later adopted a son, Henry. Bradley was a devoted family man, though his military duties often kept him away from home for extended periods. When the United States entered World War I in April 1917, Bradley expected to be sent to France to join the fighting. He was eager to test himself in combat and to contribute to the war effort. But to his great disappointment, he spent the entire war in the United States, training troops who would be sent overseas while he remained behind. He was assigned to various training camps and performed his duties well, but he felt he was missing the defining experience of his generation. While his classmate Eisenhower and others were gaining combat experience or at least serving overseas, Bradley was stuck in stateside training assignments. The end of World War I in 1918 found Bradley still a captain, having missed his chance for combat and the rapid promotions that came with it. The interwar years were difficult for ambitious officers. The army shrank dramatically, promotions became glacially slow, and many officers resigned to pursue civilian careers. Bradley stayed in the army, but advancement was painfully slow. He would remain a captain for 7 years and a major for 14 years. These were years of routine assignments, military schools, and the slow accumulation of professional knowledge. Bradley attended the infantry school at Fort Benning, Georgia, where he impressed his instructors with his tactical knowledge and teaching ability. He later served as an instructor at West Point, teaching mathematics to cadets. He attended the Command and General Staff School at Fort Leavenworth, Kansas, graduating in 1929. He continued his professional military education at the Army War College, completing the course in 1934. These schools were essential for career advancement, and Bradley performed well at all of them, though he was never the top student. He was building a reputation as a solid, reliable officer with good judgment and thorough professional knowledge. Throughout the 1920s and 1930s, Bradley served in various assignments, including teaching positions and staff jobs. He worked at the infantry school under Colonel George Marshall, who would later become Army Chief of Staff and one of the most important figures in Bradley's career. Marshall recognized Bradley's abilities and remembered him when the time came to select officers for high command. Bradley also served in Hawaii and at various posts in the continental United States. The work was often routine, but Bradley used the time to study military history, tactics, and leadership. By 1941, with war raging in Europe and Asia, the United States began a massive military buildup. Bradley, now a lieutenant colonel after decades of slow promotion, suddenly found opportunities opening up. The Army needed experienced officers to train and lead the rapidly expanding force. In February 1941, Bradley was promoted to brigadier general, jumping over the rank of colonel entirely. After 28 years as a junior officer, he had finally achieved general officer rank at age 48. Bradley was assigned to command the infantry school at Fort Benning, where he was responsible for training infantry officers for the coming war. He proved to be an excellent trainer and administrator, modernizing the curriculum and preparing thousands of officers for combat. His work at Fort Benning brought him to the attention of senior leaders who were looking for competent generals to lead divisions and corps in combat. In February 1942, Bradley was promoted to Major General and given command of the 82nd Infantry Division. He trained the division intensively, preparing it for combat. But before the division deployed overseas, Bradley was reassigned to command the 28th Infantry Division. He continued his focus on realistic training and soldier welfare, earning the respect of the men under his command. Bradley's leadership style was emerging. He was calm, methodical, and focused on preparation and training. He avoided theatrics and personal publicity, concentrating instead on making his units ready for combat. In early 1943, Bradley received orders that would change his career. He was sent to North Africa to serve under General Dwight Eisenhower, his old West Point classmate. Eisenhower had been given command of Allied forces in North Africa and needed experienced commanders he could trust. Bradley arrived in North Africa in February 1943 as Eisenhower's personal representative, tasked with assessing the American II Corps, which had recently suffered a humiliating defeat at Kasserine Pass. Bradley's assessment was blunt. The II Corps had poor leadership, inadequate training, and low morale. Eisenhower replaced the Corps commander with General George Patton and made Bradley Patton's deputy. Bradley watched as Patton transformed the demoralized Corps through harsh discipline and aggressive leadership. When Patton was reassigned to plan the invasion of Sicily, Bradley took command of II Corps in April 1943. Bradley's first combat command was successful. He led II Corps in the final campaigns in Tunisia, helping to trap and destroy the German and Italian forces in North Africa. His leadership was characterized by careful planning, attention to logistics, and concern for minimizing casualties. He worked well with British allies and earned Eisenhower's confidence. When the Allied invasion of Sicily was launched in July 1943, Bradley commanded II Corps as part of Patton's 7th Army. The Sicily campaign was Bradley's introduction to large-scale combat operations. He led his corps competently, capturing key objectives and working effectively with British forces under General Bernard Montgomery. Bradley's steady, professional approach contrasted with Patton's flamboyant style, but both were effective commanders. The campaign lasted 38 days and resulted in the conquest of Sicily, opening the way for the invasion of Italy. After Sicily, Bradley returned to England to prepare for the invasion of France. In October 1943, he was given command of the 1st United States Army, which would be the primary American ground force for the D-Day invasion. Bradley threw himself into planning and preparation. He worked closely with British commanders and with Eisenhower, who was now Supreme Allied Commander. Bradley's army would land on Omaha and Utah beaches and then drive inland to liberate France. The months before D-Day were consumed with detailed planning. Bradley had to coordinate with naval and air forces, arrange logistics, train his troops, and develop contingency plans for every possible scenario. He visited units, inspected preparations, and made countless decisions about tactics and organization. His calm, methodical approach was perfectly suited to the enormous complexity of planning the largest amphibious invasion in history. On June 6, 1944, Bradley's First Army landed on the beaches of Normandy. The invasion was the culmination of years of planning and preparation. Bradley commanded from a ship offshore, receiving reports and making decisions as the battle unfolded. The landing at Omaha Beach was nearly a disaster, with American troops pinned down by fierce German resistance and suffering heavy casualties. Bradley faced the agonizing decision of whether to continue the assault or evacuate the beach. He chose to reinforce and push forward. By the end of the day, American forces had secured a precarious foothold. The weeks after D-Day were difficult. Allied forces were confined to a small beachhead, and German resistance was fierce. Bradley's forces fought through the hedgerows of Normandy, suffering steady casualties in brutal close-quarters combat. Bradley was criticized for the slow progress, but he methodically built up his forces and prepared for a breakout. He remained focused on his mission, ignoring critics and concentrating on the job at hand. In late July 1944, Bradley launched Operation Cobra, a massive offensive designed to break out of the Normandy beachhead. After a devastating aerial bombardment, American forces punched through German lines and began a rapid advance across France. The breakout was one of the decisive moments of the war in Europe. Bradley's careful planning and timing had created the conditions for success. On August 1, 1944, Bradley was promoted to command the 12th Army Group, which included the 1st and 3rd Armies. He now commanded over 1.3 million men, the largest American force ever assembled under a single commander. George Patton took command of 3rd Army, and the two old colleagues worked together to pursue the retreating Germans across France. Bradley's army group liberated Paris in August and drove toward the German border. The rapid advance across France was exhilarating, but Bradley remained cautious. He worried about overextended supply lines and the danger of German counterattacks. His concerns proved justified when the advance stalled at the German border in the fall of 1944. Allied forces faced the formidable defenses of the Siegfried Line, and the war settled into a grinding attritional struggle. In December 1944, the Germans launched a massive surprise offensive in the Ardennes forest, creating a bulge in the American lines. The Battle of the Bulge was the largest battle fought by the United States Army in World War II. Bradley's initial response was criticized as slow, and Eisenhower temporarily placed some of Bradley's forces under British command, which Bradley resented. But American forces, including Bradley's armies, held key positions and then counterattacked, eliminating the German Bulge by late January 1945. In the final months of the war, Bradley's 12th Army Group drove deep into Germany. His forces crossed the Rhine River in March 1945 and advanced rapidly across central Germany. Bradley commanded 4 armies totaling over 1.3 million men in the final offensive. German resistance collapsed, and on May 7, 1945, Germany surrendered. Bradley had commanded American forces through 11 months of continuous combat from Normandy to the heart of Germany. Bradley emerged from World War II as one of America's most respected generals. He had commanded more American troops in combat than any other general in history. His leadership style, characterized by careful planning, concern for his soldiers, and quiet competence, had proven highly effective. He was promoted to 4-star general and received numerous decorations from the United States and allied nations. Unlike some of his more flamboyant colleagues, Bradley had avoided controversy and maintained good relationships with allies and superiors. After the war, Bradley served as Administrator of Veterans Affairs, overseeing programs for millions of returning servicemen. He worked to ensure veterans received education benefits, medical care, and other support. In 1948, Bradley was appointed Army Chief of Staff, the highest position in the United States Army. He served in that role for less than a year before being appointed the first chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff in 1949. As chairman of the Joint Chiefs, Bradley was the principal military advisor to President Harry Truman. He served during the early Cold War, a time of enormous challenges including the Berlin blockade, the formation of NATO, and the beginning of the Korean War. In 1950, Bradley was promoted to 5-star General of the Army, joining an elite group that included Eisenhower, Marshall, MacArthur, and Arnold. He was the last person ever to achieve 5-star rank in the United States military. Bradley's tenure as chairman was marked by the Korean War, which began in June 1950. He supported Truman's decision to defend South Korea and helped manage the military response. But he clashed with General Douglas MacArthur, the commander of United Nations forces in Korea. MacArthur wanted to expand the war into China, while Bradley and Truman wanted to keep the conflict limited. When MacArthur publicly challenged administration policy, Truman relieved him of command in April 1951. Bradley supported the decision, famously stating that MacArthur's strategy would involve the United States in the wrong war, at the wrong place, at the wrong time, and with the wrong enemy. Bradley retired from active duty in 1953 after 42 years of military service. He was 60 years old and had risen from second lieutenant to five-star general. His retirement was comfortable and active. He served on corporate boards, gave speeches, and wrote his memoirs. His autobiography, A Soldier's Story, published in 1951, was widely read and provided his perspective on World War II. He remained a respected voice on military and national security issues. In 1965, Bradley's wife Mary died after a long illness. Her death was a tremendous blow to Bradley, who had relied on her support throughout his career. In 1966, at age 73, Bradley married Kitty Buller, a Hollywood screenwriter. The marriage raised eyebrows due to the age difference and Kitty's flamboyant personality, which contrasted sharply with Bradley's reserved nature. But the marriage was happy, and Kitty cared for Bradley devotedly in his final years. Bradley's later years were marked by declining health but continued public engagement. He attended military reunions, gave interviews, and remained active in veterans organizations. He was a living connection to World War II and the generation that had won it. Young officers sought his advice, and historians interviewed him about his experiences. He maintained friendships with Eisenhower and other wartime colleagues until their deaths. On April 8, 1981, Omar Bradley died at New York City's VA Medical Center. He was 88 years old. The cause of death was cardiac arrest. His death marked the passing of the last five-star general and one of the last great commanders of World War II. His funeral was held at West Point, where he had begun his military career 70 years earlier. He was buried at Arlington National Cemetery with full military honors. Thousands attended the funeral, including military leaders, veterans, and government officials. Bradley's legacy is that of the soldier's general. He was respected and loved by the men he commanded because they knew he cared about their welfare and would not waste their lives unnecessarily. His leadership style emphasized careful planning, realistic training, and minimizing casualties. He lacked the flamboyance of Patton or MacArthur, but his quiet competence was equally effective. He commanded the largest American force ever assembled and led it to victory through careful, methodical leadership. Modern military historians recognize Bradley as one of the finest American generals of World War II. His management of the 12th Army Group demonstrated exceptional organizational and leadership skills. He worked effectively with difficult subordinates like Patton, maintained good relations with Allied commanders, and earned the complete trust of Eisenhower. His post-war service as chairman of the Joint Chiefs during the early Cold War was equally important, helping to shape American defense policy during a critical period. Perhaps Bradley's greatest achievement was remaining true to his values throughout his career. He never forgot his humble origins or lost touch with the common soldier. He avoided personal publicity and political controversy, focusing instead on doing his job well. He treated subordinates with respect and expected the same from them. His integrity was absolute, and he never compromised his principles for personal advantage. Bradley once said that the test of leadership is not whether you can make good decisions, but whether you can stick with them when the pressure is on. Throughout his career, he demonstrated that kind of steady leadership. He made decisions based on careful analysis and then stood by them, even when criticized. This steadiness, combined with genuine concern for his soldiers and exceptional professional competence, made him one of America's greatest military leaders. In the end, Omar Bradley represented the best qualities of American military leadership: competence without arrogance, courage without recklessness, and authority exercised with humanity. He rose from rural poverty to command millions of men in the greatest war in history, yet never lost his fundamental decency and humility. His life spanned an era of enormous change, from horse-drawn wagons to nuclear weapons, and he helped guide America through its greatest challenges. Bradley was in death as in life a soldier's general, remembered for his competence, his integrity, and his unwavering dedication to the men he led and the country he served.